In Chapter 34 of Wuthering Heights, the final chapter of the novel, Mrs. Dean continues her recollection. A strange illness had overtaken Heathcliff and changed his personality. He became restless, unable to eat, and was unusually bright and cheerful. Mrs. Dean was curious about why. Heathcliff laughed and told her, "Last night I was on the threshold of hell. Today I am within sight of my heaven." Mrs. Dean remembered Heathcliff's whole life and how when Mr. Earnshaw brought Heathcliff home, the little dark thing was harbored by a good man to his bane. She shook off her thoughts as superstitious, but she saw a vision of Heathcliff's grave. He died a few days later. Meanwhile, Heathcliff's good mood confused Hareton too. When Hareton tried to talk to him, Heathcliff told him to get away, go to Catherine. Mrs. Dean found Heathcliff wandering around, talking to the air as if someone were there, and clenching his hand when he reached for food. Mrs. Dean worried constantly until she went to check on him one morning, and she found him dead in Cathy's childhood bedroom. The lattice was open. The rain fell on Heathcliff's corpse, whose sneering grin and wide open eyes horrified Mrs. Dean. She even tried to close the eyes, but they wouldn't stay shut. Joseph remarked that Heathcliff looked wicked and the devil's taken his soul. Only Hareton grieved for Heathcliff. Mrs. Dean describes the funeral to Mr. Lockwood. Then she tells him about the rumors and sightings of Heathcliff and Cathy's ghosts. Even Mrs. Dean is afraid at night now, at this moment, and she tells of a boy with a lamb and 2 sheep who she discovered crying on the moors one night. The sheep refused to walk toward the ghosts of Cathy and Heathcliff. The structure of the chapter takes Heathcliff quickly through the steps necessary to draw the conclusion that Heathcliff's love is entirely obsession, and he's chosen Cathy, a ghost, over redemption. Heaven, for Heathcliff, means being with Cathy, and Cathy, while alive, made the same choice. The novel seems to suggest, for Heathcliff, eternal damnation with Cathy is better than being in heaven without her. And because of this choice, both are left outside of heaven, doomed to wander the moors. But the reader is left to decide whether Heathcliff and Cathy have doomed themselves to an eternity of restless unhappiness, or whether they have managed to create a version of happiness uniquely suited to themselves and their turbulent love in Wuthering Heights.